parts, and I'll hand this over to Rick.
Thank you so much. So I'm Rick Weible, former Minnesota resident. I feel like I'm part of an AA group sometimes when I attend these events. Almost 4 years ago, my family and I moved out of the state of Minnesota as tax refugees. It's just easier to tell you exactly why. I still have my computer consulting business here in the Twin Cities, R&G Visions, and I support a lot of home users, small businesses that grow into medium-sized companies and stuff like that. But I've been in the computer industry for decades, working for IBM Global Services, Health Systems, none of that matters. But I also had an early political career. I was involved right away in the MNGOP, started in the Caucus system, then also ran for a city council position, lost, and then tried it again 2 years later, won. And after serving for 4 years, I didn't think I was going to run again, but then after I saw the candidates who were going to run, I was like, no way. So then I ran for mayor and successfully was the mayor for 10 years for the city of St. Bonifacius, a small little town in southwestern Hennepin County. And if you remember some of the legendary stories of the guy who wanted to secede from Hennepin County, the first one to put a drone ban in the state of Minnesota, I'm that crazy guy. Yes, you can have a huge impact. Even at precinct caucuses, I even suggested ideas that became part of the party platform. I even suggested ideas that became templates for for the MNGOP as guiding principles and values, and it's still there today. I then also, through my precinct caucuses, became co-chair of the 3rd Congressional District for 8 years. So I worked with a congressman, Eric Paulson, and we helped change elections in the 3rd Congressional District to where we started winning more elections and helping change the dynamics of the state legislature. So a small person from a small little town, I woke up every day during those 8 years that I was co-chair of the 3rd thinking, how is it that me, this little guy from this little unknown town, could actually rise up and sit at the state executive committee meetings for 8 years and have a voice in the MNGOP. It is that easy. And unfortunately, too many conservatives, libertarians, and especially Christians believe the lie that there's separation between church and state. That has to end. And as I govern my city, I'll give you my verse, James 1:25. Those who do to protect the perfect law of liberty will be blessed. What that meant for me is that I need to make sure that I work hard to rally the troops around less government, less reliance on government, so that people can discover through the trials and tribulations of their lives who their creator is, what their gifts are, and how they can contribute back to society. Because it's that struggle that we go through is what makes our communities better, so that we can understand the human condition and that we can understand that there's hope and we are the change actors. And so when we have these lies told to us for 12 years in public education, that there's a separation between church and state, and so many people barely even go to Sunday school, when you have 5 against 1 days, it has an impact. And it also creates a fear. So today, thank you for showing up, because today we're going to rip off the veil of the fear and give you the confidence, the tools, and the ability to be able to be the change. Now remember, no single raindrop believes it's responsible for the flood. All those stupid motivational posters, I'm here to tell you, go to www.despair.com. I don't get paid by them, but they're the demotivators. They take a sarcastic look at how life ends up, and you'll get a great laugh. They even have a picture of the sinking Titanic. Maybe the purpose of your life is to serve as a warning to others. you have to have fun with it. And so part of the thing that energizes me, especially at caucus night, is you realize when you attend that night, you're not alone. You're not alone in your thoughts. And there are other people in your community that do want to make a change. Not everybody understands how, but that's okay. Showing up is the first step. Knocking on your neighbor's door and just having a basic conversation of how things are running in the city, that's another step. Showing up at council meetings, expressing your views, that's another step. It's interesting how many videos that we're seeing on YouTube where we have all these people showing up for school board meetings, city council meetings, and they're going viral. What's interesting is they're going viral because we didn't understand that that's actually the normal thought of most Americans. And now we're appreciating it. So it's time for us to stand up and start taking actions. Part of what kind of got me back into Minnesota and involved in the 2020 election and the analysis of it is I was just completely blown away by what happened in Minnesota. I have a degree in political science from the University of Minnesota, so I really did well with that degree. Being mayor of a small town at $3,000 a year, I barely broke even. So, but beside that, I knew that there were some things that were a little afoot. So just kind of in short summary, there was a lot of things that we discovered that were just unbelievable. And we have this in our other part, and you can actually look at MidwestSwampWatch.com. We have a YouTube video out there, and we actually have some of the evidence out there, such as, yes, there were ballots in a bag in Dakota County. Yes, there was a post-election review that wasn't really completed in Dakota County. Yes, they didn't follow state statute when, in regards to absentee ballots. We discovered that 5 days after state certification, so we all voted November 3rd, this state certified the election on November 24th. And the data I have is November 29th. And you can actually go to our website and see if your ballot was connected. And for over 700,000 absentee ballots, they weren't connected. Especially it's discouraging when the state law says specifically that when an absentee ballot is received, it must immediately be entered into the statewide voter registration system. So 25 days is an immediate. How many of you are moms? How many of you have kids? When you tell your kids to go, you must immediately go clean your room. Is that 25 days later? Yeah, no. I didn't think so. Okay, so just checking. So that's an interesting argument. So there's two cases. There are one group of voters that vote in person before the election. Those are considered absentee ballots. And then there's the people that vote in person on the day of election. The funny part of state law is that they have until 42 days after the election, so December 15th, to actually get that work done. But don't worry about it. We're going to certify the election before we have that work so that you can't actually file a case by December 1st and have all the evidence to find all the duplicate voters. Don't worry about that. So those are some of the changes that we're going to talk about here too. So we all have high expectations of how the government is run, and some of you might have high expectations on how the precinct caucuses are going to be run. I'm going to tell you, relax. It's going to be kind of a hot mess. And these poor people who are going to be presenting and leading the precinct caucuses, they're going to be really nervous. And probably half of them, this could be their first time. So number one thing that you should do when you walk in, have a whole lot of grace and be willing to help. Because there's a whole lot of activities that are going to be happening. So if you have a precinct caucus that all of a sudden has like 50 people there and there's just the convener sitting there and they have their paperwork out there, you might want to, if you want to get like a delegate position and kind of get a little rewarded right away, be the first person to volunteer to help with the sign-up sheets, you know, to go sit behind the table, because guess what else that does? Everybody who's now coming in the door is going to see you, and they're going to misinterpret that you sitting there behind the table, that you're kind of in charge and that you know what's going on. So what is caucus? It's not a disease. It's not the flu. It's not COVID. Okay. It literally is a meeting at which local members of a political party or potentially not affiliated. They don't know that they're part of the party when they walk in the door. But as soon as you walk in the door and you sign your name on there, you're now part of the party. Congratulations, you're a member. Okay? And it's basically, they're basically saying their preference among the candidates for running for office. So a lot of the people who are going to show up there are probably supporting a candidate, more than likely a gubernatorial candidate, because those are the candidates that typically are out there door knocking already, trying to drive people to the caucus. Why? Oh, it was kind of mentioned. So in state statute at 8 o'clock, by 8 o'clock, they actually have to have a poll of who you guys think could actually be the next real gubernatorial candidate for your party. So this is a barometer for the gubernatorial candidates to see how well they're doing. So if you don't show up and vote for a candidate that you like right now, they might think nobody supports them and they're out. So this is an honest discussion that you need to have with your neighbors, talking about the gubernatorial candidates, the local candidates that you might like, but especially a gubernatorial candidate. This could be the finish line for half of the candidates that are running right now. Okay? So what will they do that night? Number one, they're going to choose volunteers who will organize political activities in the precinct. That's kind of not true. It's not only just in the precinct, but it's that BPOU. How many of you know what the term BPOU stands for? Raise your hand. Okay, good. So BPOU, and I hate to spell this out, Basic Political Organizational Unit. Yeah, that didn't help at all, right? That's what that stands for. The way to think of it is the lowest group area where a group of delegates select their Minnesota Legislative House member and or their Senate representative. Okay? So they're a state Senate representative. So it's that group that typically is organizing everything that happens within a region. So they will do the fundraisers for picnics. They'll do the meet and greets for candidates. They may even host debates of gubernatorial candidates, Secretary of State candidates, etc. And they also try to raise money to help get out the vote efforts. They also raise money to try and do voter registration, voter education, mailers. So part of what's going to happen that night is they're going to pass around an envelope to ask you to donate money, which will either go to that BPOU, the state party, or the congressional district. So it'll stay somewhere in that chain. The other thing that they're there to do is to discuss ideas for the party to support. So these are things that are called like platform ideas, legislative agenda items, and we'll kind of walk through that there's actually a piece of paper that you can download from the MNGOP's website that you should actually download ahead of time, where you can actually write out platform changes or legislative ideas, and then they can vote on it that night at the precinct caucuses, and then it'll go up to the next level.
Are these what they call the resolutions?
Yes, they are. Yep, absolutely. And then you also that night choose delegates who will endorse candidates at future conventions. So you will select representatives within your unit that night that will represent to go to the next House or Senate level to basically start the nomination process for who they want to endorse for the legislature for the state of Minnesota. Okay? And this is actually, those delegates are ultimately responsible for really testing that candidate to make sure that they understand the party platform, they understand the dynamics of the community. So this is why sometimes you will have communities that have different flavors of candidates because they represent their district well. You might have the term that you've heard of rhinos, ultra-conservative. Well, that's because that's kind of the makeup of those delegates that have nominated those types of candidates. Okay? And so that's part of the beauty of the Republican Party, is that it is really open. And so we have this spectrum of candidates and spectrum of needs based upon geographical area. So for example, farmers are going to nominate more agricultural related type of candidates out in greater Minnesota. Around the Duluth area, you might find candidates that might be more pro-mining and may not have thoughts about agriculture or industry. In the metro area, you may have more conservative values that are more proponents of homeschooling, more proponents of business expansion, and maybe some healthcare flavors in there. So that's how we get this spectrum across the Republican Party based upon geographical regional needs. Okay, and that's a good thing. And so as you move up into the delegations, you may find that even especially in areas like this, where you have a good mix of rural and some consolidated downtown areas. And so they have different needs, where rurals might want to have more county road development, and the downtown development might want to have more housing concerns. Okay? Then, number 4, you'll vote for the governor in the straw poll. So when is caucus? That's right, February 1st at 7 p.m. Try to get there a little bit early, because they have a very tight schedule of one of the top things that they're going to do is say the pledge. I mean, on a cold winter night, it's going to be one of the best things that you can do and one of the rarest things that you can do. Should warm up your heart. This is where you can actually go. So please go ahead and take out your phones and take a picture of this if you need to find out where your caucus is. The Secretary of State offers this, and so does the MNGOP. If you go to the MNGOP's website or the DFL site, it'll take you right here anyways. Yep.
I might have missed something, but at caucus, they do a poll so everybody in attendance has a chance to poll for what candidate we want to see endorsed for governor.
Correct.
Now, when do the same people there also vote for delegates?
Yes.
Okay, that takes place before the poll for the governor?
I'll actually give you the schedule here. So, and it's a great question. So he was asking, correct me if I'm wrong here, one of the agenda items is to vote for a governor preference, but also that night, do we also select who we vote for delegates? And yes, that is true, and I'll show you guys a little bit later, kind of the schedule of events. And it's also available on the MNGOP site. They actually have kind of the precinct caucus chair agenda, and some of that is actually set by state statute, kind of the order that it has to go through, and I have that here today for you guys. So here we go. Who should attend? So some of you have some talking to do with some other folks. Just like she said earlier, this is the gateway to the political process in Minnesota. It absolutely is. And I get a lot of people that say, precinct caucuses are too early. And I say, yeah, but there really is no better time in Minnesota to do it, because we all know what happens in March. High school hockey tournaments, March Madness, get the stuff off the lakes. Then you get into April. Yeah, we got to be planting stuff. We got to get stuff going. And then May, forget about it. It's graduations. It's move all the students out of the state and around the state, get them adjusted, summertime jobs. And you can pretty much forget about June through August. So until we've had our fill of the state fair, we're not interested in politics. And then we'll go ahead and have the state primary. And then we'll go ahead and think about an election in November. So I then asked the public, is there a better time that you wish to have the precinct caucuses other than a cold winter night where you can't do much outside anyways? And seriously, is TV that great? All right. So, number 1, you can propose changes to the state party platform. Those are the party goals. Less taxes, no abortion, pro-Second Amendment, belief in the individual. The party platform is available at the MNGOP site, and you can review that. Number 2, you can propose resolutions to change local, county, state, and federal laws. Because then you can kind of get a sense, especially if you have a council councilmen or women sitting right there in the room, and all of you say, hey, we need to get Highland Road fixed, and you vote on that locally, now your council member knows that they have a group of people right there at the ready that might be willing to come before a council meeting to say that this is an important issue. So it starts right there. And you can exchange numbers with that council person to actually say, I'll help you. When can I come to the next council meeting? Most public folks that are going to attend a precinct caucus and sit with you, they're going to be pretty open and willing to talk to you. Why? Because they need your help desperately. All right. 3, you can learn about helping your local party interview, vet, and support candidates. It's so true. These candidates are looking for volunteers. And so many of these BPOUs that are out there don't have anybody. Do you realize that a third of Minnesota doesn't even have a functioning BPOU? So when you talk about a power shift, she's exactly right. It could literally just take 6 of you within a precinct caucus to overrun an entire BPOU and vote out all of the officers and change its trajectory if you need to. Okay? Number 4, you can sign up to be a precinct election judge for election day. This is one of the gateway pieces because the deadline to sign up is May 1st. So they'll have sheets right there. Remember where you volunteered to get up there at that desk? You get to see all of the volunteer sign-up sheets there, and that's one of them. One of the things that the party's missing this year, which is really disappointing, is there's another position that's really important. And you have to go to their website to sign up for this because they won't have the paperwork there, and that is the ballot board judges, which monitors and handles the absentee ballots. That's a big one. And for those of you who are of retirement age, we really need you to be there because they want you to be there for 46 days. And it's a great way right before Christmas to stock up on that cash for the grandkiddos for Christmas. Yep.
Is there any legislation in place right now for election day precinct judges? Like, do employers have to give employees time off?
Yes, they do.
Precinct, okay.
Yep.
So if I sign up to be an election judge that day, I can go to my boss and say,
Here, I'm gonna
okay,
help out the video. I'm gonna give you the mic, ask the question again.
ask what question?
Uh,
Ask my question?
Yep.
Okay. So the question I asked was if there's any legislation currently in place mandating that employers give their employees time off to be election judges.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, Senator Cran, but I believe that is true. And the employer, you have to give them, I think, at least 10 days written notice that you're going to do this. And then the employer has to make adjustments for you to do this. Also, as an asterisk, they also have to give you time off to be able to vote in an election too. Okay? So, great question. And that's really important. So, and you get paid to be an election judge. So it's kind of a cool gig. Some employers actually designate it as if you have kind of donation time, they sometimes will count that as well.
Can you be both an election judge and a ballot board judge?
So the question is, can you be both a ballot board judge and an election judge? I'm going to say because the timelines sometimes cross, in most counties, the answer is going to be no. So, because sometimes they're still accepting absentee ballots on the day of the election at the county seat, that they're still processing them on the day of the election. So,
You explained what the ballot board judge was, but could you define if there's a qualification to be, what is it called? The precinct election judge and what that requires or what that job or position would entail?
so what that job requires is that you be of voting age and a registered voter in the state of Minnesota, and you just have to have the willingness to go through the training, and they will train you on everything that you need to do to be able to do the job correctly, and that's paid as well. And then you just have to be able to be there for the entire time, which is usually from 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. typically is what they ask of. Some cities will shorten that to where they allow half days but don't count on that. And so you just have to have the willingness. So.
You have to also read and write English.
Yes, that is true. So he said that you also have to read and write English. So everybody okay with that? Raise your hand. Okay, so you meet those requirements? All right. And so number 5 is sign up to be a ballot board judge to help with the 45 days of absentee balloting. Unfortunately, that won't be there. I looked through the party documents last night on the website, and they failed to have that sign-up sheet available for precinct caucus night. I have a text out to Donna Bergstrom to see if she can correct that. 6, you can learn about local issues in your school, city, and county, then help educate other voters as well. That's hugely important because so many times you may not realize that you have a school board member right there in your precinct caucus and even at the next level. And so there has been more of a desire of the population to actually start getting engaged in school board elections. And so these BPOUs, they have to start doing it. And if you can volunteer for officer positions there at the BPOUs, you can actually make that happen. 7, you can become a delegate to support and decide who gets the party nomination for the Minnesota legislature, U.S. Congress, and the governor's office. And that also includes the Secretary of State. That also includes the Attorney General's office as well. So as you move up within the party, if you become a delegate, you actually get to see more and have a larger influence because all of these politicians are looking for your vote, support, and volunteer time. 8, you can help the party by becoming involved in issues you care about. There are a lot of people that come into the party for specific issues. There's groups that are out there that are definitely pro-Second Amendment that are heavily involved in the party. Traditionally, there's a lot of pro-life groups within the party as well. And there's even pro-business groups that are involved in the party as well. But this is an opportunity for Christians to get back. And so if you remember during the 80s, where Reagan kind of brought in the Christian conservatives to come in to the party, that helped get him the boost to win the presidential election. And so we're looking for that again over time. 9, you can vote for a governor candidate you like in the straw poll. If you don't get out and support a candidate, they may quit their candidacy. It's important that they know what you think. And of course, number 10, you can say the pledge with other like-minded individuals. Hey, on a cold winter night, what a better way to warm the heart. All right, so here is the actual agenda, kind of in a shortened area, what to expect. And so I kind of condensed it down. They have an actual 16-point agenda. I've kind of merged some of them together. So number 1, 7 p.m., start. They call to order, and then they do the pledge. So I'm telling you, please get there early. 6:45 is your deadline to arrive, okay? So get there a little early. Try to help out because these folks are really nervous about it. Number 2, they will introduce the temporary officers. So that means the person who's in charge of setting up the meeting. So they are kind of called the secretary to start it off. And if there's really long lines, they're going to pause and they're going to start reading some of the candidate letters. They may even read letters from the state party talking about voter integrity, talking about the future of the party, the welcoming letter, etc. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't really pay attention to those, and they also find it extremely boring. Unfortunately, you have to expect this because there's still people checking in. So this is why I say you have to walk in the door with grace. 3, they will literally be reading the legal requirements of today's caucus. They will be reading statutorily, they have to do it. They have to read the state laws of what they're required to do. So again, this is a grace area. 4, they will introduce the people who are observers. Those are the kids who are under 17, who aren't eligible to vote. Or they may actually be members of your community that have decided, you know, I just want to see what kind of crazy goes on here, and I'm not affiliating myself with you guys. So it could be a 40-year-old newspaper reporter, and they might be there as an observer. And then you may have elected officials. And so hopefully the person there is aware of the elected officials and may be able to point them out. That's not always the case, especially in smaller communities. You'd be surprised how many people don't know who's on their city council, who's on their school board, and so hopefully they'll introduce themselves. Then we start getting a little excited. Number 5, we will elect the chair, the officers, and the tellers of the caucus. This is literally the fun part of not it. Because after they've read the statutes and it says, you're responsible for the next 2 years of being the caucus chair, people think that is an overwhelming responsibility. Like, you're responsible for running this show for the next 2 years, and they misunderstand, oh my gosh, I have to like call meetings and I'm responsible for all of these random cats in my area? No, thank you. Actually, just step up to the plate and do it, because guess what? You don't have to do anything until 2 years later anyways, and you get to be the person to actually call the caucus and set up the room and arrangement for where that night's going to be. That's really the truth of it. People get turned off and think, oh my gosh, this is a huge behemoth organization. Oh, and whoever's voted secretary, they're literally responsible for making sure that the pre-filled out forms of who the delegates are, the minutes, it's already all pre-filled out, that you are literally just responsible for delivering that package back to the BPOU or a congressional district, okay? And after that, you have no responsibility literally for the next 2 years. And then the tellers, you guys are the volunteers to help count the secret ballots of the presidential poll, and potentially if somebody asks for a secret ballot regarding a resolution, that's what the tellers do. They kind of help count those votes. So then, hopefully at about 7:30, 8 o'clock, because I'm sure all of 1 through 5 went perfectly clean and nobody had any questions. But no matter what, number 6 is going to move up or move back. But no matter what, at about 7:30, somebody is going to have to remember, oh, we have to make sure we get our election results in by 8 o'clock. So we need to start the straw poll. So then people will then vote for their favorite gubernatorial candidate. Then by 8 o'clock, they have to call it in to the BPOU or the congressional district. And then those numbers then get fed to the state party and the Secretary of State's office, where you can actually see the results statewide. And so then at about 8:30, you will literally hear a soft moan depression of potential candidates saying, it's done. Yep, go ahead, sir.
When you vote for the poll for the gubernatorial candidate,
Yep.
you just write it on a piece of paper. Are there any requirements of correct spelling or initials are allowed or anything like that?
Good question. Typically, the state party will actually have a sheet that the precinct convener would have already printed out with the candidates' names in there. And so it will be, as of, I believe it's this Friday, any candidate that has filed seeking the Republican endorsement, they'll already have the sheets of paper already printed and pre-formatted. And then you just basically fill out the checkbox or the oval. And so for folks that are visually impaired, you can have your designee help you fill out that ballot. It's not as stringent as the state laws, so it's more neighborly. You can definitely get the help there. I just ask that please, before you go to these gubernatorial candidates' websites, learn what they're about. And even at this slow time, you might actually find on their websites events that they're going to that you may actually be able to attend. And there's some pre-posted videos. I believe there's been at least 4 debates between the gubernatorial candidates that you can go back and review those and kind of see how folks have answered certain questions. But most of their websites are pretty clear as to where they stand on issues. So that's good. Number 7. So after the straw poll, then this is where your exciting part comes into play. This is where you get to select the delegates and alternates for Senate and congressional districts. Okay, so this is where you get to select like-minded people to go up. So if you want to become a delegate, I would ask you if you bring at least 6 people with you and you just ask them, hey, I want to be a delegate. I don't need you to be a delegate, but I'll represent our ideas. I just need you to show up and vote for governor, and I need you to show up and vote for me. And then after that, you can leave. And that's a little bit of a lie, because actually most people leave right after the straw poll. And I'm telling you, don't leave. So bring your 6 friends, have them come in, sit through this, have them vote for you, and then they can leave. Now, the longest part of the night is not this next section. 8 is when they start passing out the donation envelope and the volunteer sign-up list. Number 9, they will actually start talking about the election judges and poll challengers, and they'll have those sign-up sheets, and they'll describe what those positions are. So the way to think of this is that election judges actually have the legal authority to challenge voters. Poll challengers literally have no legal authority other than just to stand there and watch and observe and potentially send a text to the lawyers team at the state party, or potentially just kind of go talk to an election judge and say, hey, I've observed this. Does this look right to you? That's about all that they can do. And they're not paid.
Rick?
Yes, sir.
The ballot counting board, is that the correct term? Are those individuals selected by the party?
So no, it's a good question. So let me go back here. So you're talking about the election judges, correct?
Well, the ballot counting, the ballot board.
Okay. So the ballot board, I'm gonna put an asterisk right here, because there's actually a Supreme Court challenge right now in the state of Minnesota that we're waiting to find out what the decision is going to be. But during the 2020 election, what is supposed to happen is that all the parties, there's 4 of them, are supposed to submit lists to the Secretary of State, Steve Simon. Those counties were then supposed to then first primarily go through those lists for their counties and determine from both parties who they would call them, ask them if they'd want to be part of it. And if they didn't find anybody, then they started hiring their own employees to basically do this function. And some counties actually didn't even look at the list, and they just hired their own people. I'm going to do a secondary asterisk here. So the Supreme Court is supposed to decide whether these counties were in the wrong or in the right for what they did. However, there's a little bit of crow that we have to eat here in the state of Minnesota. 2 counts here. Number 1, yes, there were over 7,500 people who had signed up on the election judge list for the state party, but when the party went through and submitted it to Steve Simon, only 3,500 addresses came out clean and actually matched up. And there wasn't due diligence to clean up that list, and so we kind of stepped on our own foot and tripped over ourselves. But regardless, the Secretary of State's website says they're looking for over 30,000 volunteers. So if you cut that number in half, that means the MNGOP needs 15,000 people. So we didn't even start out on the right foot. Okay? Let me come around.
That's okay.
Because I want to make sure that
How many delegates does a or a precinct receive?
Oh, this is such a nasty question. They will tell you there at night, and the reason why I say it's a nasty question is because it's based upon a really complicated mathematical formula based upon how many votes in the last presidential election were cast out of each of those precincts. That determines how many delegates rise from the precinct to go into the next level of the Senate districts. So for example, if nobody voted in your precinct for Donald Trump, you would actually get 0. But if half of your folks, it's based upon a crazy formula where typically each district is going to get between 8 and 16 delegates is the way it kind of goes. Okay, on average. Yep. Yeah, in some cases in Minneapolis, it's as low as 2. So, okay. All right, then the next thing after the election judges, this is where a lot of people, the rest of the folks who aren't as interested, will literally walk out, because this is where number 10 comes in, the platform and action agenda resolutions. And so you will have quite a few people that are not interested in the agenda, the party platform, or about talking about bills, because they know it's going to be debated, et cetera. But there are some people there who are really excited about debating an issue. And this is where you can actually test those theories at a local level. And so you could actually have a plethora of ideas to have out there. A quick thing that is actually available on the MNGOP's website is this little thing, the Robert's Rules of Order. Okay. More than likely, you're not going to have a strict parliamentarian or a chair that is going to follow every single one of these things to the letter of the law. Okay? And it's your neighbors. Okay, let's get real. You should run the meeting like if it's at your dining room table and having a proper discussion. But to kind of move things along, if you see a little bit of drifting and you kind of want to just, especially in the resolutions area, this is where it becomes important. So a resolution, when you have that piece of paper, you say, I move that we consider strengthening the Second Amendment in the state of Minnesota to remove permit to carry, that everybody should just be able to open carry without any type of a permit. And you have that resolution, you say, I move that we do X, Y, and Z. If you get a second, that means you now can have discussion on that motion, and then you can vote on it. If there's no second to your motion, it's dead, and you get to move on. So when you hear something that you like and you want it to be passed, it's important that you be engaged and say the word second. Okay. And then if you like the idea, but you think a little different nuance needs to be made, you can amend the motion. Okay.
Just for clarification, is this the delegates are doing this once they're voted in, or is this everybody in the room?
So for clarification, this is everybody in the room. So, and the same process also happens when you get up into the BPOU levels. It gets a little bit more stricter because you have a lot more people that are there. And so when you have a room full of 100, 300 people, that's when Robert's Rules of Order really has to take into effect. But when you're there at your precinct caucuses, where you might have anywhere between 8 and say 80 people, it's a little bit more manageable. And most people are there just a little bit softer that aren't going to be as engaged. But this is a way to basically kind of help kind of manage that.
Okay. So is there a few more slides that
Yep.
you want to finish up with? Okay. And then like maybe 10 more minutes?
Yep, less than
Okay.
that, yep.
Okay, thanks.
So here's where you can go to actually get the resolutions form. It is right here on the MNGOP's website. And so you can take a picture of this. You'll actually see the state party platform there. And you'll see this form here that you should pre-download and write any resolutions that you want to have. So I'll wait for everybody to take a picture, because this is a good one for you. Yep.
When is the actual endorsement of our governor official?
So the question is, when is our endorsement of the actual governor official? So the actual endorsement works up through the delegate process, where once you select your delegates from that precinct level, then they go to that BPOU. That BPOU then selects delegates for the state convention, which is typically held in May. So usually mid-May to late May. And then at that convention, all of those delegates select the nominees, or they get together and select the nominees for governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and state auditor. And attorney general, yep. And then here are some quick election integrity resolutions. You can take a picture of this as well. So number 1, require state or federal issued ID for voting. 2, end vouching. 3, minimize absentee to just 14 days instead of 46. Get rid of the drop boxes. 5, remove mail-in ballots, in-person only except military. 6, removal of poll books, paper registrations only. 7, only relatives or court-appointed guardians can help a person vote. Staff members of facilities not allowed to help to vote. 8, restore party ballots at the ballot boards. This is the asterisk because we're waiting on the Minnesota Supreme Court ruling. Number 9, no county canvass nor state canvass until all voter histories are entered in. 10, free state issued ID for voting. This is the difference between the MNGOP and the MNDFL. On the DFL website, they have a position called county liaison. We don't have that on the MNGOP side. And so Midwest Swamp Watch is working with local activists to create those local liaisons where we're actually doing conversations with county officials to talk about the dead voters, the bad addresses, the duplicate voters, all of that kind of stuff. And we're looking into the future where we're looking at all of the new registrations that are coming in. And anytime we see a UPS store, a mailbox registration, we're letting them know that that's an invalid voter. And the other part of the county liaison that the DFL has is that they create this relationship so that way, anytime that there's not somebody available on the list, they'll go find somebody and get them on that list. So that's something new that we're going to start creating as well. Election judges, if you want to be an election judge, I hate to say this, but you have to register everywhere. You have to register with the party. You have to register with your city. On this slide here is a list of cities that require you to register with them in order to become an election judge. On this slide is also the county-specific election judge applications if you want to be an election judge within their county. So you have to go to those websites and actually go there. You can actually find this at the Secretary of State's website, that link there at the bottom.
So Rick, if your city or county isn't listed there, then if you register with GOP or whatever, then you're fine.
Correct. Yep. So the question is, if your county and city is not listed on here, you just register through the MNGOP, you'll be fine? Yes, that's correct, because in the party submits the list to the Secretary of State and then parses that out to each of the counties so that they can select.
Are you supposed to get a response from them, like, hey, thanks, we got you registered or whatever?
So the question is, will you get a response from them? No, not right away, and that's unfortunate. We're going to try and change that, and so we actually have some individuals here that are actually working with the MNGOP that's got the old list, but will probably help support them on the new list, that as we get the list on the MNGOP side, we'll give them the acknowledgement, at least from the MNGOP side. County auditors are typically a lot better, where they will actually let you know, typically within 30 days, that they've accepted your application. So, this is what we're finding out. All right, so that is the end of our presentation. If you want to donate, send tips, MidwestSwampWatch.com and tips@MidwestSwampWatch.com. You can see our YouTube videos there, and you'll see our evidence out there for a lot of what we've discovered, and stay tuned.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rick.
Yep.
All right. Before we have Senator Cran come up, I'm going to just take a 10-minute break. Do you have a question?
I had one question.
Rick, we have one more question.
My question was, you said the donations might be divided in one of three areas. I was just curious who decides and why, and where do those monies go?
So I'll tell you, when I was co-chair of the 3rd Congressional District, what we typically did is we took all of those envelopes at the BPOU level, and we would just say, keep the money there, and the 3rd Congressional District wouldn't take it. And then in other years, when the state party was so in debt, we actually used all that money to help pay down the debt. And so we basically took all of that caucus money and sent it all directly to the state party to try and rehabilitate them. This year, I don't know what they've decided as a group of officers, but more than likely, I think it's going to go back to the traditional way, which is they're going to try and keep the money at the BPOU level. So, good question.
Okay. So we're just going to take a 10-minute break. And if you'd like to use the restrooms are just to the hall and to the right. We have some coffee and some donuts if you'd like to eat a little bit. And but